Hi guys, welcome to my channel, Steady Funds with Maiwa Adeosun, and in today's episode we're going to be talking about startup businesses. We've already discussed lifestyle and we've also touched on growth, but now let's talk about what is a startup. Right, so a startup business is quite different to lifestyle and very different to growth. A lifestyle business, as we mentioned, is really going to be focused on a work-life balance, and a growth business is focused on revenue. Well, a startup business is more focused on metrics, and not just any metrics, but metrics that are important to the business and metrics that will eventually lead to revenue down the road. So we can talk about customer count, customer acquisition, we can talk about market share, we can talk about app downloads. All these things are metrics that don't necessarily relate to revenue directly, but indirectly, and as a leading indicator, that means something that eventually will lead to revenue. We can track that as a startup business. So in today's video, we're going to be talking about the characteristics, the advantages, the disadvantages, some of the financing options, and examples that can give you an idea of what to look for when considering a startup business. Okay, so characteristic number one is going to be a founder-operated business. Now, this is quite similar to a lifestyle business in the fact that you're going to have the owner operating the business, but in this particular case, a founder could be one, and also could be many. So, for example, you might have a business that has 3 founders, 2 founders, 4 founders, and all of these founders typically have experience, a diverse set of experience, and offer something unique to the business to push the business forward. So the first characteristic is going to be a founder-operated business. The second characteristic of a startup business is going to be scalability and a global market. Startup businesses are unique for finding opportunities that can be scalable and that can have a global reach. So if you're looking at a startup business, they must have these 2 characteristics. The third characteristic of a startup business is going to be the use of tech, or at least leveraging technology. Technology now in the 21st century, 2023, it has to be involved in a business if you're going to have reach and scalability, as mentioned in the last point. Technology is the only way forward, and that is what businesses and investors are looking at in terms of identifying a startup business. The last point that we have for characteristic is going to be an innovative solution. It's one thing to have technology, it's another thing to have founders, but are you bringing an innovative solution to the market? So this is a characteristic of a startup business. It's innovative, it is disruptive, and it's something that is unique. That is a characteristic of a startup. Okay, so now we're going to be talking about the advantages of a startup business. And the first advantage of a startup business is going to be access to finance. We'll get into more detail a bit on that later, but just want you to remember that is an advantage of a startup business. And if you want to actually compare it, it actually is an advantage to lifestyle, but maybe not so much an advantage as compared to a growth business. The second advantage of a startup business is going to be high returns and rapid growth. Because of the use of technology, now you're going to be able to tap into markets that you probably wouldn't be able to unless technology was involved. So that opens up the opportunity for high returns and for rapid growth. So that is an advantage of a startup business. The third advantage of a startup business is going to be agility and less bureaucratic systems. Right? So agility basically means that as you're developing your product or your solution, you are able to kind of pivot and make decisions very quickly based on the fact that you're a small, nimble sized company, but you're making really impactful decisions on a daily basis, much more quicker than a larger company, or let's say a growth business would be able to do that. And one of the characteristics that I think is actually very important is team chemistry and culture. So as a startup, you're going to be able to hire some of the best, brightest, talented minds, and that can build a culture, that can build a strong chemistry, and hopefully everybody buys into the vision, everybody buys into the direction of the company, so you feel like you're moving in the same direction with like-minded people. So the chemistry and the culture is an advantage of a startup business. So now we're going to be talking about some of the disadvantages of a startup business. Now, as we mentioned in the advantage section that it has a tendency for high returns. So some of the disadvantages would be the tendency for high risk and high uncertainty. This can be very problematic for some, but if you have the stomach for risk and the appetite for uncertainty, then it can be easily managed going forward. But you're going to be looking at some of the legal considerations, you're going to be looking at competition, you're going to be looking at talent. These are things that are going to be challenging and are going to present you with a level of uncertainty and a level of risk down the road. Right, so the next disadvantage for a startup business is going to be limited resources. While you might be able to get access to finance, but you're not going to get access to large amounts of finance very early as a startup business. You're going to have to prove yourself or prove the solution and prove that what you are building is actually what the market needs. So you're going to look for a product market fit. Once that product market fit is established, then you might now open up opportunities for finance. But getting to that stage, you're going to have limited resources, you're going to have to work with a small team, and that's going to be very constricting. So that is a disadvantage. Okay, so the third disadvantage is going to be lack of reference and example. As a startup business, you're really trying to be innovative and disruptive. So that also means your business model might not necessarily be tested, or there might not be a clear example of it working in the past. So you're flying with a lot of uncertainty, and that also can give you a sense of flying blindly. So that is a disadvantage. So the fourth disadvantage will be work-life balance. As a startup business, you're really going to have to focus on the growth of the business, and which is going to be quite similar to a growth business in terms of work life. So you're not going to have the flexibility that you might have as a lifestyle business. So keep that in consideration, and that is a disadvantage. Okay, so now we're going to move into the financing options for a startup business. First and foremost, you're going to really rely on your friends, family, and your personal finances. A startup business is very challenging, and you're not going to have so many options, but to get yourself off the ground and get your idea into the actual development stage, you're going to need to rely on personal finances, friends and family, and that's really what it is for number one. Number two, once you've actually been able to get a viable product, prove your concepts, then you can now start reaching out to possible angel investors. These are people that have high net worth and typically look at investing in small businesses that have the potential for growth so that they can reap a higher return down the line. So an angel investor is somebody else that would be most likely a good bet for a startup business to get financing from. The third source of financing would be VC, which stands for venture capital. Venture capital businesses are well-established organizations that typically have investors that key and pour into those businesses, and they invest on the behalf of their partners. VCs are companies that are looking for startup businesses that also have the potential for high growth, and they are also very well knowledgeable in the industry and the markets that these startups are trying to play in. So they come in with experience and they come in with finance, and those are also a very great source for financing as a startup business. Last but not least, and I put a very big asterisk on this one, is commercial banks. Depending on the area where you're operating and depending on the industry, you may or may not be able to get access to finance from a commercial bank. And this is typically going to also be once the business has been up and running and it's established to a certain degree, then you might be able to get access to finance from a bank. But typically starting a business, starting a startup business, you're not going to be, especially in the African markets, you're not going to be able to access finance from a commercial bank. So keep that in mind. Okay, so now we're going to be talking about the examples of startup businesses. Pretty much a startup business is something that really focuses on online products, app solutions, and web services. These three things are very important, especially in today's market. If you want to become a startup business, or if you are a startup business, you need to focus on these three things: online products, web services, and app solutions. Those are the hallmarks of a startup business in today's market. Okay guys, so if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to share and subscribe. And please, in the comment section, comment if you're team lifestyle, team growth, or team startup. I would love to hear, and let's discuss. See you in the next video.